Hello, everyone. This is John from Coins, RPGs, and more. And today I wanted to talk about something that's it's a bit interesting to me. This is a departure from the usual fare of system recommendations or solo play or anything about coins. Today I want to talk about RPGs, but I want to talk about mostly the responsibilities of the dungeon master or the game master, depending on the term you prefer. And there's something that kind of has been sitting strangely with me over the past couple of years, and I kind of wanted to articulate a little bit, get my thoughts down in a semi organized fashion. Now, joining me for this is my ever present companion. This is my cat, and she has decided that she wishes to be involved in the call, so she's on my lap. So let's talk about or game master responsibilities. I'll try to use the generic term there. Game master responsibilities, that's a phrase that encompasses all of the things that we expect game masters and referees to do when running a game. This includes all the stuff that we expect a game master to do before a game starts and what they are expected to do after the game is over. Typically, if you are a game master, you are creating the world that the players are playing in. Now, you can do this in a fashion as detail-oriented or lax as you like. Maybe you really enjoy spending months drawing a map, writing up, detailing cities to the point of you knowing where each district in the city is and the major shops that are in each district and the names of the shopkeepers, the names of their kids, details. Excuse me. You might be that kind of person that does it. You might be the kind of person that prefers DMing by the seat of your pants, in which case your campaign is Goblins in the Wild West. We start in Tombstone and ride at dawn. And that might be the entirety of your campaign prep. I mean, I don't know. I'd play the Wild West game. I think that sounds great. I already have character ideas coming up. Saying, oh, I could be, I could be a goblin gunslinger. Wouldn't that be cool? Give me everything I got. I want it now. So something weird like that. But so it doesn't matter how much work you're doing here. The point is that we expect the GM to do that work before the campaign ever starts and before each session starts. We expect them to prep for the session. And most GMs will prep at least 1 hour. They'll spend at least 1 hour prepping for every hour of gameplay that they expect to play. Sometimes it's more than that. Some GMs will spend 2 hours prepping for every hour of gameplay they expect to have. And that's a lot of time. And most game masters, they get into it. They really they enjoy that process. And when they're prepping, they're not just sitting at a computer saying, "Oh, I wonder what'll happen." They're reading monster manuals, checking on stats for the monsters. They're comparing, the stats in the manual to what they want the encounter to do. They're maybe doing research on YouTube, looking at encounters that other people have created, trying to make it the most exciting encounter they can. They're reading modules. They're drawing maps on Roll20 or on pencil and paper. Ooh, excuse me. It's after midnight. I'm tired. I'm sorry. They're doing a lot. They're doing a lot of different things. Preparation for the game is a very involved process. But what are the other things that we kind of expect game masters to do? Well, most of the time, especially if you're playing at home, The game master usually ends up being the person who's hosting the game. This isn't always the case, but in my experience, if I'm a game master, I'm the one hosting the game. Why? Because I'm the one who cares the most about being able to play, and therefore I can't sit there and ask somebody else to host because no one else is as interested as I am. And at that point, the group most likely won't meet and won't play because I'm the one who has the most impetus. And if I'm not hosting it and making it happen, then it doesn't happen. That's been my experience. That hasn't always been my experience, but the vast majority of the time, that has been what I experienced. And so, as a host, you're also cleaning your home and you're preparing snacks, food, whether you just go and buy a box of donuts or you go and you hand make some kind of treat or meal, depending on how long the groups can be playing. You're doing a lot of that stuff. And you can farm some of that out to the other players if you're the kind of person comfortable with doing that. Me, if I'm hosting something in my home, while I love it when other people bring things, I feel that it is my responsibility, it is my duty to make sure that there is food in my house to give to my players. And if I fail to do that, then I take that as a personal failing, not as a game master, but as a host for friends coming over to visit. So that's kind of my process. You may feel differently, your group may feel differently, and that's okay. That I'm not telling you that you all have to do what I do, but I'm just saying, talking about my experiences. So there's that time as well that you have to spend prepping, and however long that takes you, whether that's 2 hours to clean your apartment from top to bottom, or more than 2 hours to clean, vacuum, cook, plate things in an attractive fashion, figure out the drinks, there's the grocery shopping. It's a process for someone to prepare to host a dinner party, which is kind of what RPGs can turn into at their home, especially every week or every other week. It's a process, and it's a process that should be embarked upon with love. With love for the game, love for your players. I'm not talking romantic love, unless you're into that kind of role play, which is totally fine with me. Go for it, do that. That's awesome. I'm talking about the love that we have for our friends, the love that we have for our family, that kind of friendship love, that familial love that we show each other. And that's how we should approach, in my opinion, the hobby. Doing it with that kind of love, and that means that there's a lot of time invested in stuff. Because when you love something, you invest your time. Time is our true treasure in life. It's the one thing that no matter what, we cannot get more of. That's time. So where you invest your time in prepping for your game or in prepping to see your friends, that's where your love is. But let's talk about the other things that we expect of game masters. Unless your group really tends to stick around, the game master tends to be the one cleaning up afterwards as well. I would really love it to see more groups take part in the cleanup process after a game, making sure that if a table needs to be put away, helping to put the table away. If dishes need to be done, then at least gathering the dishes into one spot. Throwing out the garbage. Maybe someone volunteers to take the garbage out to the garbage bin, or whatever little tasks that need to get done. Those are nice things to do for a host after a long party, when everyone, because by the end of the night everyone's tired. And the host especially has been doing this for hours before everyone else just got there. And so if you can do something nice to help out, it's always appreciated. But that's not even the end. There's one thing that role-playing game designers have done for years, since the dawn of the hobby, really. And and they always put this on the GM, and that is table dynamics. There's a section in almost every edition of the game books that is all about how to host a game, what behavior to exhibit during a game, how to deal with problem players, how to deal with rule disputes, how to manage uncomfortable situations, all these how-tos. And they're always placed in the Dungeon Masters or the Game Masters section of the book. And if the system you're playing has multiple books, they always put it with the Game Master's book. And that's the part that I find myself disagreeing with more and more as I get older and as my experiences with gaming broaden. I don't like the fact that all of that is also put on the Game Master. Because now the Game Master is not only creating the world and managing all the monsters in the world and potentially managing the duties of a host, but now you also want the Game Master to be a psychologist, to be a referee in all disputes, even if that's just, one of your players has bad BO and doesn't wear deodorant. But now it's the Game Master's job to be the one to talk to that player. Or maybe there's a player that comes in that's really grumpy. And it's the Game Master's job to talk to them about them being grumpy and how that's disruptive to the group. Or that, now, some of this ties into if you are the host of the event. Generally, the host is expected to be the one managing how an event plays out, unless they hire someone to manage that for them. A professional, party manager type person, like DJs sometimes do this at weddings. They help to manage things. But, when you're just having people over at your home, you tend to be expected to be the one to kind of step up and take care of those problem situations that aren't related necessarily to the game itself or the gameplay. They are interpersonal problems. They are, Timmy and Tammy don't get along and they're arguing, and suddenly everyone turns to the host to be the one to mediate this argument. I think that kind of pressure, putting all of that in the Game Master's section of the book, puts a lot of more social pressure on the Game Master that I feel is unnecessary. And it can potentially create a barrier between someone who is new to the hobby and the idea of being a Game Master. Because if they're a very diligent person, then they're reading all those sections, and they're nervous. And they don't know, what do I do if one of my players suddenly decides to, take off their shirt in the middle of a game and be hugely inappropriate towards another player? And that kind of stress, it's not necessary to put that only on the GM. My argument, or the thing that I want to talk about is, I feel that issue, the issue of group dynamics and how to behave at the table, we as game players and anyone who is designing a system, I believe that information, we should be putting that in the player's handbook. We should be putting that group dynamic stuff and how to resolve rule conflicts in the player's handbook, and put that in the purview of every player at the table, because 9 times out of 10, the people gathered around the table are supposed to be friends, people you already know, or people that you've met through gaming that you are comfortable welcoming into your home or that you're meeting at a game store. And when we game together, we are creating a social contract. Now, this may be an unspoken social contract that everyone kind of is assuming everybody else knows what's going on. Or it may be an explicit social contract. Maybe you have a session 0 and the game master passes out a sheet of, what are your, use that term triggers. What are your triggers, or what are your absolute full stop things that you don't want to have in the game? What are the things that would make you unhappy? What are the things that make you happy? That's all a session 0 is setting expectations, but it's also setting a social contract. If your group is getting together to play Dungeons and Dragons, and you suddenly say, well, let's play 7th Sea, and you say, that I'm not running D&D anymore, I'm going to run 7th Sea now, you've broken the social contract as a game master. Now, that's a pretty egregious break, and I'm just using that as an example. But establishing what the social contract is something that is the responsibility of every person at that table. Because every person at that table, not just the game master, but all of them, all of us, are responsible for our fun, for doing what needs to be done so we can have fun. But I think we all share a responsibility for making sure that the table has fun. Because if we only focus on our own fun, then we end up with situations where someone is going to be a glory seeker at the table. They're going to try to make sure that as many events in the game session focus on their own character as possible, because they're out for their own fun, and that's what's fun for them. And in a role-playing game, that attitude, that self-centeredness or self-focus is not really fun for most people. That may be fun for a while. You can I think that it's okay every once in a while to have a session that focuses on one character more than the others, especially if it's plot and story relevant. Or if it's a special event, like it's that player's birthday, and this is the game that celebrates their birthday. And so, you know what? Today, it's all about your character because it's your birthday, and this is our birthday present to you as the group. That's totally cool. I think people should do more of that stuff. I think that that's something that helps to turn a gaming group or a group of strangers into a group of friends. But I think it's important that all players take the onus or the responsibility of that group dynamic upon themselves and don't just throw it at the DM and say, well, it's the DM's job. I don't have to worry about that. The DM's going to do that. I don't think that's fair. I think that's part of why you tend to get DM burnout. I can tell you the times that I burned out on DMing have never been the game itself. It's never been a frustration with the game. There are times when I burned out on a system, and I'll admit that. But when I burn out on a game, on something that I'm meeting friends with every week, and I experience burnout, 9 times out of 10, the real reason why I'm burning out is bad group dynamic. And then people expecting me to be the only one who fixes it. Somehow I'm supposed to have the magic solution as a game master that makes everybody get along. And I'll be honest, I've studied psychology. My degree is in applied behavioral science. I understand behavior. What I also understand is that's a pretty nasty thing to do to somebody, especially somebody who isn't trained and who doesn't have a degree. You get your group of friends, and let's say you're all still in high school, and then one of you volunteers to be the DM. And now you're putting all of that pressure on the DM. And maybe they want it. Maybe that's their goal and they really want to be that kind of person that takes charge in everything. But I think it sets a bad precedent, personally, to say that the DM is in charge of everything. I think it sets a very bad precedent. I think that group dynamic is the responsibility of the group as a whole. And if there's someone or some activity in that group that is not helping the group dynamic, then that is something that the group should discuss. Don't wait for the DM to meet with somebody privately and say, hey, you're all using computers at the table. And this other player, I see you're using your computer as well, but I also noticed that you're on Facebook and not paying attention. You know what? I think that that's a discussion for the group. I think that the group should be the ones to, in that session 0, talk about what they're comfortable with, what's okay at the table, and what isn't. Now, the DM can take the lead in this if they want. That's fine. But the group needs to have buy-in. The group needs to have the ability to say, you know what, actually, we all want to have the right and the ability to check Facebook when it's not our turn, because turns take really long and we don't want to sit here and do nothing. And if that's something that the group decides, roll with it, because ultimately we're together to play a game that's supposed to be fun. And if your group dynamic is forcing you to sit there and stew when it isn't your turn, that's not fun. But especially if that's going to last, if you only get one turn every hour because combat becomes complicated and no one's willing to use the time-saving methods like a program such as Roll20 or D&D Beyond, no one wants to use all those things, and so it just takes forever because people are always checking the rules, they're going over their sheet, they're sorting through their spells during their turn time instead of doing that during someone else's turn, or all these time-wasting practices that tend to emerge with larger, more established systems. If that's what's going on, and you guys want to have a solution of, it's okay to break out your Nintendo Switch or something when it's not your turn, as long as you are ready to go when it is your turn. I mean, that's your group. You guys do you. All right. That's not how I like it. I like electronics off. I like when I'm playing in person, I want everybody to be focused on either what the DM is saying, whoever the DM is, whether it's me or somebody else, or on the map, because I am a big fan of putting together a 3-dimensional, if possible, surface with miniatures and terrain and obstacles, and having the focus be upon that. And yes, you're going to need your character sheet, you're going to need your rules and your spell book and whatever you're using for whatever system you're playing. You'll need all those things, but the focus ought to be on what's happening in the game and what's the game master saying, not on Facebook or texting each other, unless you're texting each other secret messages. I mean, if you want to start texting each other secret plans of like, hey DM, I'm going to try to pick this person's pocket, and the DM texts back, okay, give me a roll, and you roll the die and then tell the DM what you get, and doing all that through text messages, if it's not detracting from the rest of the game and it's not slowing the game down, go for it. That's cool, especially if the rest of the party is having a big RP moment and they're all talking to each other in character, and one of you guys is in the background texting the DM because you're trying to rob the store owner while the party is deciding about what to purchase. I mean, that's kind of stuff's fine. But that's why it's important to discuss that as a group, because the group needs to have some kind of consensus about what's okay at the table and what isn't. And how are we as a group going to solve our problems? How are we as a group going to solve rule disputes? Now, if the group decides that all rule disputes are solved by, I'm going to ask the GM and we're going to go with whatever ruling they make and look it up later, which is my personal preferred way of doing things, that's fine. That's your group. That's if your group decides, well, you know what, if we're not sure, then, you know, this other player is going to look it up, or they're really good at remembering things and they're the rule guru. They're the rule guru. Then that's fine too. They don't even, doesn't even have to be the game master. It's someone else who just knows the rules really well, and they want to be in charge of remembering rules and reminding people when they miss the rules. That's cool. It doesn't have to be the game master that's doing that all the time. Now, if the game master makes a ruling and says, no, this is what we're doing today, then that rule person, that's their cue to say, cool, and be done. That's how that group dynamic ought to work as well, because the game master still is, they're still the game master, but they don't have to be in charge of everything. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're having disputes at the table, don't wait for your game master to solve it. Don't sit there and say, well, it's their job because, you know, all these things in the rule books are part of the game master's guide. It shouldn't be that way. Our participation in this hobby, our passion for this hobby is something that we all share, which means that we should also share the responsibility for being there for each other as players as well as our characters. And that can also mean that if the GM is pushing things too far, if the GM is becoming a tyrant at the table, then the group as a whole should be ready to talk to the GM about it and say, hey, this is not the game we want to play. This is not what we signed up for. This is not what we discussed in our session 0. Don't throw it all on the GM, because if you throw it all on the GM, then you've got to be ready to deal with whatever the GM throws out. And most of us aren't really, you know, we want to have some say, with some buy-in. We don't want to sit there and sit on our hands and say, well, okay, my friend Bob, entertain me for 4 hours. I'm going to sit on my hands and I want to be entertained. If that's all you want, play a video game. Like, I'm not trying to be mean or rude or anything. But seriously, like, there are days when I'm like that, and that's all I want to do is I just want to kill things and take their stuff. But if that's the mood that I'm in, I'll just grab one of my video games and I'll play a video game instead, and I'll kill things and I'll take their stuff. And I'll get that out of me, whatever that is, that little, you know, demon on your shoulder that's telling you to just be a murder hobo. You know, get that out of your system before you go and play with your friends, because 9 times out of 10, your friends aren't going to be in the same mood you are. And maybe they are, in which case you can have a kick butt session. So this is a bit of a ramble, I know. I'm kind of going everywhere here with this. I guess what I'm really trying to just say is, like I've said, don't put everything on the GM. They're doing a lot already, especially if they're also the host of what you're doing. Take some personal responsibility for your actions at the table as a person, and for the group dynamic and how it develops. We should all realize and recognize that we all have a role to play around the table, not just as our characters. And when we do that, when we act in concert as people not just as characters, then the game is better for everyone because it's something that you can start looking forward to taking part in every week. You want to be there because you're not just meeting up with a bunch of strangers to play a game. Suddenly, those strangers start to become friends because you start to really build that trust with each other. You start to really build that respect and that appreciation for each other because you see what each other is dealing with, and then you act. See and act. If all you're doing is seeing and you're not acting, then you're a spectator. And D&D, as much as I love Critical Role, is not a spectator sport. It's not. It's fun to watch other people play, especially really talented people. It's entertaining. It's something that I adore doing, and I make time every week to watch Critical Role. And some other streamers out there as well. Me, Myself, and Die with Trevor Duvall is one that I have devoured almost religiously. Everything he puts out. It's fascinating to me, and I love it. And I've done my own solo plays, and so I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here. But I think it's important for us to recognize that when we are gathered with our friends, when we are gathered together as friends, we are not spectators. And we shouldn't treat our friends like spectators. We shouldn't treat our fellow players like they are spectators, and we shouldn't become spectators for them. We're all in this together. We're all around the table together, rolling dice together. So be together and take that dynamic and really roll with it. And I think if you do that, if you treat the game and the togetherness as something greater than just I showed up, I rolled dice, I laughed, and I left. If you do that, I think you'll find you'll have a better game. And if you as the DM can let go of some of that I must control everything aspect and let other people take charge of little things in the game and let other people be, let them be the ones who work on disputes at the table or something, or ask for help. I think you'll find as a game master that you'll have a better time too, because it'll be just that much less stress. Because instead of everyone looking to you all the time, when something happens, you know that you have a group that you can look to as well. That's really what I wanted to say. And I thank you for staying with me this long. I hope that you got something valuable from it, from my kind of almost random rambles. If you did, if you like this sort of thing when I just talk about a topic and wander through it a little bit, please give this video a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment down below, let me know if this sort of style was fun for you, or if you'd prefer that I kind of do a more bullet point, done, description of what I'm talking about. I'd appreciate the feedback. I kind of enjoy these rambling videos. I think that I find them more relaxing myself. But just because I enjoy doing it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy listening to it. And so that feedback is important. Otherwise, I'm going to keep doing what I enjoy doing. And that's going to be doing these rambling videos. And that's all that's going to be released. And then if people don't like it, then I'm not doing anyone any good. So I really appreciate your feedback, if you're comfortable. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you for stopping by. and peace be with you always. Bye-bye.